Hey everyone, this is Life of Christ. We'll be in Unit 3 starting off, and this unit is called The Birth Narrative. And so, a familiar story to most, the Christmas story, basically how Jesus was born, but we're going to go into it a little deeper. And so, looking forward to talking to you about this. But we're going to do Unit 3, 1 and 3, 2 in the next video. And we'll move on from there. But real quick, I want to share with you, if possible, a couple of announcements. We have our memory verse, John 15, 1 through 7, is going to be February the 12th. So make sure that you study for that. Take your time through that. I will, you probably already have, I've already shown you some of the things to study for previous to this. So make sure you just look at those notes over that. But that will be on the 12th, my day back. So let's get started. Unit 3. All right. Unit 3.1. Christ's humanity seen in the story of his birth. So we're going to focus on the following things today as we look at Luke 2, 1 through 7. But we're going to discover Christ's reason for coming as a baby in reference to that section of the scripture. We'll comprehend that Jesus was not only fully God, but also fully human, understanding this story, because it's very specific in certain things. And we'll talk about Jesus' humanity seen throughout the story of his birth. Understand Jesus' purpose for coming into the world as a baby. Why did he have to come? We'll look at that. We'll observe the troublesome situation that Jesus encountered on his birthday and apply his humble beginnings to our own lives. And so that's what we're going to do for this particular lecture today. Oh, and then we'll take some time either today or the next video to watch the Bible Project, Luke 1, 1 through 2, to kind of explain the importance of this birth narrative. Now, before we move into this, just want to say there, chapter 1 of the birth narrative of Luke does cover certain things. We read that in Immerse. I am skipping that because of the time crunch, but it does go over the birth of John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, and the relationship between Mary and her cousin Elizabeth, and how that all take place. And Mary's announcement of the birth of Christ. But I am going to focus more on the event of the birth. And so today, let's do that. So in this reading, Luke 2, 1 through 7, let's read. It says, "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up to Galilee, or from Galilee, and from the town of Nazareth to Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of the lineage of David, to be registered with Mary and his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn." All right. So some key things I highlighted here, that Caesar Augustus was the one who was the now Caesar. Caesar, the original Caesar had died about maybe a few years before this. And Augustus, Caesar's, actually his adopted son, became the new Caesar. And Quirinius was a governor of this area, Syria, also the area of where Judea would be. And so we'll talk about this particular decree and registration decree to allow all the firstborn men to go back to their hometown. And so we'll talk about that. We'll also look at Mary and Joseph being betrothed and what that means, and the idea of her having Jesus in a manger. So let's break this whole scripture down. So first off, a little background. The human situation, a census. So a census goes out basically to every man of that time, a family that is, and they had to go back to their hometown. And so this was for certain things. One, to make a population count, because the census is is a means to seek the number of people that live in a particular area. But this was also a situation that was given through Quirinius because one, for population, but also to weed out the zealots. If you remember the zealots, they're a group that we mentioned in Heroes of the Faith. The zealots were an evil, basically anti-Roman group, and so they were attacking soldiers, caravans, and all those things. And so Rome puts out this order through Quirinius that every Jewish man needed to go back to their hometown to register. Why? Because if one registered, that would weed them out from being a zealot. Those who did not register were the zealots. And so a very wise and smart idea. This is what really actually led to everyone going back to their hometown. But it also shows you God's hand in everything. He orchestrated this to happen so that Joseph would go from Nazareth back to his little small town of Bethlehem, in which he was born. And so this is the map of that particular town. And so, yes, again, God's hand is in this and allowing Joseph to go back, but it also completion of the covenant and prophecy in which we see in the books of Micah and Genesis, Micah 5:2 and Genesis 22:18. Here are those verses. So Micah 5:2, it's a prophecy is given. It says, "O Bethlehem, from you shall come from me one who is the ruler in Israel." So the prophecy is fulfilled in this, that someone from Bethlehem or this baby, a baby that is born in Bethlehem, this small town would be gifted with the Christ child. And then in Genesis 22:17-18, I added a verse here to make it make sense. God is talking to Abraham. He is basically letting Abraham, he's going to keep his promise. And he says that your offspring shall all nations of the earth be blessed. So basically in the offspring of Abraham, which is Jesus is Abraham's descendant, he would be the one to bless all nations. And so this prophecy is fulfilled through that. So there we go with those two Old Testament examples. Now, let's talk about the idea of being betrothed. And so Mary and Joseph were in a situation, as we saw before. They're engaged. That's what betrothed means. But in the Jewish culture, betrothing or the engagement process was a little different than ours. Most our culture, the man asked the woman, or if you're progressive, the woman asked the man, and it's usually a intimate ceremony between the two, or event between the two, and they tell their families and friends, and then they have the wedding. Probably engaged for maybe a couple months, if a year. But anyway, when it came to the Jewish way of betrothing or engagement, it was a little different. The Hebrew word for betrothed is yurisin, and this would be the first stage. It was two stages. This is about the first stage of the engagement process. The second being the nuisin. And so the first stage would be basically between not the groom and the bride, but mostly between the bride's father and the groom. So it was an arranged marriage. Usually the groom would come to the father and say, "I want your wife's hand in marriage," and the father will say, "Okay, what you got for me?" Which was common. Usually it was a trade. So this is still common in certain cultures, but they would offer a cow or some camels or a bit of land and basically make a trade and say, "Okay," and so that particular groom was then adopted into the family, and whatever he owned or the portion that he owned would go towards the family. That's how it was. Anyway, but the bride had no say. She just honored what the father wanted her to do, basically. Sounds pretty tough, huh, ladies? I know. Some of you would be like, "Wait, what? No." Anyway, and then after that, they would, the bride and groom would go through this process, and they were not permitted to see each other at all. The groom would prep a place for his bride, house, with partnership with the father. And then the bride would basically prep to be a bride. She would go and train under her mother and what it means to be a good wife. a good mother, and things of that nature. And this would be the first stage, which is the uricid. Pretty much lasted however long the father wanted it to. It could be less than a year, but this process, the bride and groom were not permitted to see each other. Now, the nuisson was the second part of the ceremony or the engagement, and this is where the wedding ceremony would happen. So the first time the bride and groom would ever actually be in each other's presence, ever actually be in each other's face. So first time they ever actually would exchange looks, this would go on during this particular moment. And so, yes, there would be breaking of glass as a symbol of a commitment. A whole party ceremony filled with food and wine. Was a Jewish culture. Interesting. Now, let's look at Mary and Joseph's situation, though. When we come to them, it says that they are on their way to Bethlehem and they are still betrothed. It doesn't say that they have gone through the marriage. They are still betrothed. So it's possible that they had not gone through the first stage of marriage. And so on the journey to Nazareth, let me repeat. It's possible they didn't go through the second stage of marriage. And this is a sticky situation because the reason being, Mary's pregnant, and her fiance has chosen to stay with her. So I'm sure the family questioned, like, what in the world did you guys, jump the gun too quickly? Which in Jewish culture during that time was unheard of. As a matter of fact, Old Testament law, if a woman was caught having sex outside of marriage and she was taken out of the city and stoned to death. That because of the sin that was going on back then. There was a lot of men and women who were doing those things. So the fact that Joseph stays with Mary during this time is very, very brave of him to take care of this of his fiance. Anyway, they travel to Nazareth. And so we'll talk about the donkey here in a second. I'm going to skip this real quick and go to the map here. Here we go. So this is the route in which they took. The red markings is the route that they could have took, and then the green is the actual route. We'll come back to that too. But I just wanted to show you their journey. All right, let's see. So first off, sorry about that. 2 through 5 says that there's no really mention of a donkey. It just says they started traveling. Most people think that she was on a donkey. I used to disagree with that statement, but it's possible. It's possible for a pregnant woman to ride a donkey if the donkey is moving quite slow. But remember, Mary is 9 months pregnant, and Joseph, we don't know how old he was. He could have been, Mary could have been 16, Joseph could have been 20. It's possible. Some believe Joseph was a little older, like 40, and Mary was 15. But, to make it not so gross, let's just make Joseph 20 and Mary 18. How about that? Anyway, so they're walking, and they walked this entire time. And so the route itself, the distance on between the two cities today, if you were to drive, was about 60 to 70 miles, which is about an hour on foot. On foot. No, about an hour driving, maybe an hour and a half. But for on foot, that would take possibly days, maybe even weeks to go through. Especially, and if we go over here real quick, I'm gonna show you this. Especially if you look at the green route. Now, most people would actually nowadays you just go through Nazareth and go straight down to Bethlehem. But back then, because of the situation between the Samaritans and the Jews, a lot of Jews did not take that route. They actually went around Samaria to avoid that particular route. And so, as you can see, that's where they went. They went around the river of Jordan into Jericho and down through, now, my handwriting was a little messed up there, but they do go down through Kiram and then to Bethlehem. So the route itself could have took about maybe 4 days. That's it's possible for a healthy person, but more than likely with someone who's pregnant. And then I said Joseph being old, but let's just say Joseph was a little younger, and maybe a week and a half. So if you look at Mary's situation, what are some risks of walking along that distance? Let's pause the video, and I'll have you all discuss that with your class and then with the teacher, and then we'll push play. All right, I'm sure there was a great discussion you all had, but There's a lot of risks going on there with Mary being out there pregnant. That's why Joseph doesn't get a lot of credit, but he's one of those men of faith that I really look up to. Like, man, Joseph, taking care of somebody's child that's not your own, staying with the woman that you love, protecting her through all this, and dealing with all that ridicule from family. Speaking of family, let's skip this part. Let's go to the actual birth. So, 6 through 7 says that when they get to Bethlehem, there's some couple of situations they have to go through, some trouble situations. So let's talk about situation 1. When they get there, there's no room in the inn. And so in the midst of giving birth, they are told they cannot stay there. Now, the inn itself is translated into, it could be an inn, or most people, scholars believe that the Jewish word for inn was guest room, where guests would stay, family members, out-of-town members would stay. Now, this was a national decree, but every firstborn male to go back to their hometown. So when Joseph goes home, Bethlehem's a small town, so everybody's coming back there. But I'm sure that he had family there. They knew he was coming, so why didn't they make room for him? Plus, she's pregnant, and more likely when they got there, she was in the midst of giving birth, because it says immediately she gave birth. So is it possible that there was no room, or they couldn't stay in the inn? You know what I mean? Could be possible that was a situation. Either way, though, there is issues. So now they have to make a decision, and actually, they're told to go and there's a stable. Now, the stable back then wasn't your regular stable like we have today, like barns. It was mainly, ancient stables were more like caves. So this damp cave they went into, filled with cows, horses, and various other animals, goats, and droppings all over the ground. They were told to have the baby in there, and then they had the baby in a feeding trough. But let's talk about the second situation here. The situation was the birthing process. Now, having just gone through this, let me tell you, this situation they're in is completely unsanitary. Well, first off, let's talk about the help. My wife had many nurses working with her when she was having her baby. In this situation, there were no nurses. And so who birthed the child? Well, let's just put it together. If it's just Mary and Joseph, who do you think gave birth? Now, most women were trained to be midwives. Mary was trained to be midwife, and at the age of 12, and so to help her mom out, or her aunts or things like that, or sisters to have babies. So Mary knew what she was doing, but Mary couldn't help herself give birth. So who do you think gave birth to that son? Yes, it was my boy Joseph. Again, the GOAT. Joseph was the one who helped Mary deliver that baby, guys. And I'm sure Mary was literally telling Joseph while they were giving birth, Joseph, you gotta make sure and do this. And he's trying to coach her and give birth to the baby. And with no experience at all, first time, because it wasn't tradition for a man to give birth, or to aid one to give birth. Excuse me. It wasn't a tradition to do that. Men usually sat and waited till the woman gave birth and it was announced. It's a very unsanitary area filled with cow dung and all sorts of animal dung, in a place where animals ate, so spit and things like that. This is equivalent to a hospital telling somebody who checked in there to go to and check in. You can't stay in this hospital, but we have the dumpster back there. That hospital will be shut down if that was the case. But anyway, they had it in the feeding trough. And then lastly, they wrapped him up in rags. It says swaddling clothes, but more than likely it was the soiled rags of his father that he'd been wearing for weeks. So, all right, that's the lesson for the day. But I want you to answer this question on your own with the class. So I'm gonna stop it here, and so we'll conclude there, and we'll pick it up in our next video in Unit 2, 3.2. Thank you so much, and have a great day.